20 years ago, my father stood up in front of 200 people at my sister's wedding, clinked his champagne glass, and erased me from existence. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. He just looked across the crowd, across my mother, my siblings, our family friends, and calmly said that I was no longer his son. That moment ended my life as I knew it, but today I'm sitting in a Manhattan law office staring at a check for $97 million. With my name on it. My name is Bryce Holloway, and the man who publicly destroyed me, left me everything he owned. Yeah, the same father who called me a disappointment in front of everyone we knew, who threw me out of the family like garbage, who said I was dead to him. That man, Dennis Holloway, made me one of the wealthiest people in Ohio. My sister Piper, she got $1. My brother Colton, $1, and me, the son who walked away from the family empire to become a small-town veterinarian, I got everything. $97 million, 12 properties, and the company I refused to inherit when he was alive. The lawyer slid a single-sealed envelope across the table. A letter from my father, written 6 months before he died. My hands trembled as I picked it up, because Dennis Holloway didn't apologize. Not ever. He ruled his world with an iron fist, one that never bent, never yielded, and never forgave. So, why, after everything he did to destroy me, did he leave it all to me? The answer, he said, was in that letter. And when I opened it, I finally understood that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who love us in ways we don't understand until it's too late. For the last 20 years, I've lived as far from that life as possible. A small animal clinic in Oregon, a one-bedroom apartment above it. Every morning at 6, I make coffee in the same chipped mug I've used for a decade. Walk downstairs, unlock the door, and start my day. At 7, I'm treating a border collie with a torn ACL. By noon, I'm explaining to Mrs. Patterson why her cat needs insulin shots twice a day. By evening, I'm elbow-deep in surgery on a dog that ate a sock. It's quiet, predictable, peaceful. Exactly the life I wanted. My receptionist, Meredith, always says I'm the calmest vet she's ever worked for. Nothing rattles you, she laughs. Not angry owners, not aggressive dogs, not even the 300-pound pig someone brought in last month. But Meredith doesn't know. That calm didn't come naturally. It took years to build. Years of learning not to flinch, not to break, not to feel too deeply, because before I became this quiet version of myself, I was someone else entirely. 25 years ago, I was the heir to Holloway Manufacturing. My father's pride, his legacy, his investment. He built that company from a garage in 1975 with $200 and a dream for a better brake pad design. By the time I was in high school, Holloway Manufacturing employed over 3,000 people across 4 factories. Our name was everywhere, on buildings, scholarships, hospital wings. We were royalty in our small Ohio town, and I was supposed to inherit it all. Dad had it mapped out like a military campaign. Wharton undergrad, Harvard MBA. A few years in corporate America before coming home to take over. When I was 16, he'd walk me through the factory floor, hand heavy on my shoulder, introducing me to foremen and supervisors. "This is my boy, Bryce," he'd say. Pride swelling his chest, he's going to run all this someday. But the truth, I hated every second of it. The smell of machine oil and hot metal made me sick. The endless spreadsheets and profit margins felt like a foreign language. I didn't want to learn. While Dad talked about supply chains at dinner, I was sneaking veterinary textbooks under the table, reading about surgical techniques by the glow of my phone. When he dragged me to board meetings, I stared out the window at the sky, watching the birds, wondering what it would feel like to heal something instead of building it. My brother Colton was different. He lived for that world, worshipped it. He started working in the factory mailroom at 14 and knew every machine, every worker, every process. He wanted to be my father, but he wasn't the oldest. And in Dennis Holloway's world, that meant he'd never be first. My sister Piper was brilliant. Wharton, top of her class, a financial genius. She could read a balance sheet like it was poetry. She modernized operations, found inefficiencies, saved the company millions, but she wasn't the oldest either. And then there was my mother, Ruth Holloway, a retired schoolteacher with a gentle heart and the patience of a saint. She was the only softness in a house made of steel. She understood me in a way Dad never could. When I was 12, I brought home an injured raccoon. Dad wanted to call animal control. Mom helped me nurse it back to health in the garage. When I volunteered at the animal shelter, Dad said I was wasting my time. Mom drove me there every Saturday morning anyway. "Follow your heart, Bryce," she'd whisper when Dad wasn't listening. "Your father loves you. He just doesn't know how to love something he can't control." I wanted to believe that he could love me, just not the way I needed. But standing there now, in that lawyer's office, 20 years later, holding the letter from his shaking hand, I realized I'd been wrong about more than I ever knew. Everything fell apart the night of my sister's wedding, June 2004. It was supposed to be perfect, and in my father's world, perfect meant expensive. The Columbus Country Club was transformed into something out of a magazine: white roses, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet, and 2 ice sculptures shaped like swans. He spent $50,000 just on flowers. I was a groomsman in a custom tux that cost more than most people's rent. Despite everything brewing between us, I was happy for Piper. She looked radiant, truly in love. Her groom, Nathan Brennan, came from another powerful Ohio family. His family owned luxury car dealerships across the state. Dad adored him. It wasn't just a marriage, it was a merger. But Piper, she really did love him, and that was enough for me. The ceremony went perfectly. Piper cried during her vows. Nathan's voice cracked when he said, "Forever." Mom dabbed her eyes with the same handkerchief she carried at her own wedding. Even Dad looked emotional, or as emotional as a man who thought feelings were flaws. The reception was alive. Champagne fountains, a 12-piece band, laughter echoing off marble walls. I remember the hum of conversation, the glow of lights reflecting off the glasses, the sound of forks against plates, then the sound of Dad's knife against his crystal glass. Clink, clink, clink. The band went silent. 200 guests turned toward him. He stood, straightened his bow tie, and smiled the kind of smile that made people nervous. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "if I could have your attention for the father of the bride's speech." The crowd quieted. The room seemed to hold its breath. "When Piper was 5, he said, she told me she wanted to be a princess. I told her she already was one, but if she worked hard, she could become a queen." Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. He turned to her, glass raised. "And today, seeing her marry Nathan, I see that queen. Piper has brought nothing but pride to this family name." He paused. Then, slowly, his expression changed. The warmth drained from his face like someone flipped a switch. The air thickened. "Family," he said, voice hardening, "is everything. The Holloway name means something in this town. It means integrity. It means tradition. It means putting family first." He turned to look at me, his eyes locked onto mine. And in that moment, I knew something terrible was coming. "Which is why," he said, "it breaks my heart to announce that as of today, Bryce is no longer part of this family." The room exploded into silence. The band leader froze mid-song. Piper's smile vanished. Mom's champagne glass shattered on the floor. Dad kept going, calm, cold, deliberate. "This morning," he continued, "I discovered that Bryce has secretly enrolled in veterinary school at Oregon State, behind my back, behind all our backs, after everything I've built, after grooming him for 23 years to take over this company. My eldest son would rather play with puppies than honor his family legacy." The words cut through me like steel. I could feel 200 eyes burning into me, whispers rippling through the tables, Piper gasping, Mom's hand over her mouth, and my father, standing tall, proud, furious. That night, something inside me broke. He had turned my sister's happiest day into my public execution. And when I walked out of that ballroom, I knew I would never go back. I left Ohio the next morning. I didn't take a single penny. I didn't look back. For 20 years, I built a quiet life. I built peace. I built distance. But now, sitting here in this Manhattan law office holding that letter, I can't help but wonder, why now? Why me? What did Dennis Holloway finally see in his dying days that made him give everything to the son he once disowned? Maybe the letter holds the answer. Maybe it's something else entirely. All I know is, the moment I break that seal, nothing in my life will ever be the same again. And as I unfold the paper with trembling hands, I can already tell my father's final words are about to rewrite everything I thought I knew about love, legacy, and forgiveness. You ever have one of those moments that burns itself into your memory so deeply you can still smell the air years later? The faint scent of roses, champagne, and something else, something rotting just beneath the surface. That was the day everything I knew about family, loyalty, and love came crashing down in front of 200 stunned guests. It started as the perfect wedding. My sister Piper, radiant in white, marrying Nathan, the golden boy of Columbus society, the kind of man who owned a yacht before he paid off his student loans. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed linens, and imported flowers that probably had their own passports. Laughter, champagne, that delicate hum of money trying to look like happiness. And then, my father stood up. Dennis Holloway, the man whose name could make bankers flinch and governors return his calls, raised his glass for what everyone thought was a toast. His voice cut through the air like a blade dipped in venom. "Before we all raise a glass," he said, "I think there's something my family should know." The music died. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Nathan's aunt, bless her vulture heart, already had her camcorder out. Of course she did. This was going to be society history. My mother whispered, "Dennis, please, not here, not at Piper's wedding." Her voice trembled, but Dad didn't even glance at her. "Sit down, Ruth." Those 3 words could have cut glass. Then he turned to me. "You knew about this, didn't you?" he said, his eyes burning through her. "You helped him betray me." Mom's face crumbled, her hands shaking as she sank back into her chair. Piper was frozen, her wedding makeup running in black rivers down her face. Colton, my brother, stared at his plate like it contained an escape hatch from reality. 200 guests, forks suspended, jaws tight, watching the Holloway dynasty implode in real time. Dad wasn't done. Not by a long shot. "You're a disappointment, Bryce. A complete and utter disappointment. You spit on everything the Holloway name represents. You want to throw away your birthright to give flea baths and put down strays? Fine. But you'll do it without my name, without my money, and without my blessing." And then, like the final gavel strike in a courtroom, he said, "Get out, now. Don't ever come back." The room was silent. The kind of silence that hums in your ears like static. I stood, slowly, the sound of my chair scraping against marble louder than anything else in the world. My heart was pounding, but my legs were steady. I walked up to the microphone the band had been using. 200 pairs of eyes followed me like I was walking to my own execution. "Piper," I said, looking right at my sister's devastated face, "I'm sorry your day got ruined. You look beautiful, and Nathan's a lucky man." Then I turned to the crowd, the polished, jeweled elite of Columbus. For what it's worth, I'd rather disappoint my father by following my dreams than disappoint myself by living his. I left that reception hall, past the ice swans, past the imported fountain, past the life I was supposed to live, and into the one I chose for myself. I drove 17 hours straight through the night to Oregon in my beat-up Honda Civic, the one Dad said was an embarrassment to the family name. 17 hours of gas station coffee, rain-slick highways, and the kind of clarity that only comes when you've burned every bridge behind you. I'd already been accepted into Oregon State's veterinary program, paid the deposit with money I'd earned cleaning cages and feeding strays. Dad never knew. I'd learned to hide the things that mattered most from him long ago. The first year was brutal. I arrived in Corvallis with exactly $3,000 to my name and a studio apartment above a Chinese restaurant. The smell of sesame oil was constant, like my new cologne. The walls were cracked. The radiator screamed like a ghost with anger issues, and my window overlooked a dumpster. It was perfect, because it was mine. I worked 3 jobs. Coffee shop from 4 to 7 a.m., making lattes for professors who didn't remember my name, tutoring undergrads in biology during the evenings, teaching kids who just wanted to scrape by, overnight security at a medical building on weekends, flashlight in one hand, textbook in the other, walking empty hallways while studying anatomy. There were nights I ate sleep for dinner. Weeks I chose between gas for my car or food for my stomach. I became an expert at finding free pizza at club meetings I didn't belong to. My classmates talked about ski trips to Mount Hood, while I counted coins at the grocery store for discounted bread. But every time I wanted to give up, I saw his face, my father's eyes, that disgust, the way he said disappointment, like it was my new name. That memory became my fuel, burning hot enough to keep me going through 18-hour days and 3 hours of sleep. Mom tried to reach me. She found out where I was through Trevor, my college roommate. She'd call him once a month, always crying, always saying she loved me, that she was proud of me, that Dad's anger would pass. She begged me to come home for Christmas, to call her, just to let her know I was alive. I never answered. Not because I didn't love her, but because I knew she was wrong. Dennis Holloway's anger didn't fade. It crystallized. It became permanent. 5 years passed, then 10, then 15. Silence grew into its own kind of ghost, one that sat at every holiday table I wasn't invited to. I graduated in 2008. Dr. Bryce Holloway, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. The diploma came in the mail. I hung it on my cracked apartment wall, right next to a photo of the first dog I ever saved, a German Shepherd mix named Duke. Everyone said he wouldn't make it. I stayed with him 48 hours straight, adjusting meds, checking vitals, whispering that he'd make it. When he walked out of that clinic, tail wagging, I knew I'd made the right choice. The business loan came in 2010, $40,000 that felt like $40 million. I bought an old vet clinic in Bend, Oregon. The equipment was ancient, the paint peeling, the floor uneven, but it was mine. I built it one patient at a time, one family at a time. People started to talk about the vet who'd stay late for emergencies without charging extra, the one who made payment plans for people who couldn't afford surgery, the guy who kept a fund for elderly folks whose pets needed care. Word spread slowly, quietly, until one day I realized I'd built something real. I never married. There were chances. A pharmaceutical rep named Jessica who always brought me coffee with her samples. A fellow vet, Carmen, who understood the exhaustion, the long hours, the heartache of losing patients. But I couldn't let anyone close enough to ask about my family. Dr. Reeves, my therapist, said I had abandonment issues. I told him I had reasons. Then, 3 weeks ago, the phone rang, 2 a.m, unknown New York number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. Is this Bryce Holloway? Who's asking? My name is Harrison Blackfield from Blackfield, Russo and Associates. I'm calling about your father's estate. My heart stopped. Dennis Holloway passed away yesterday. You need to come to New York immediately. The law office smelled like leather and old money. Persian rugs, oil paintings, marble floors polished so bright you could see your own guilt reflected in them. Harrison Blackfield looked like he'd been born wearing a three-piece suit. Silver hair, sharp eyes, the kind of lawyer who'd watched dynasties crumble from the comfort of mahogany. "Before we begin," he said, folding his hands, "your siblings are contesting what I'm about to tell you. They've already threatened legal action. Their lawyers have been calling since yesterday." "My siblings?" He nodded. "They were here, yesterday morning. Your brother was vocal. Your sister cried through most of it. Your mother sat in silence." He slid a thick document across the desk. "Your father's will is unusual. He changed it 6 months ago, after his diagnosis. Heart disease. Doctors gave him 8 months. He made it 6. The will was dated January 15th, 2025. The ink still smelled fresh. To my son, Colton Holloway, it began, who spent 20 years as my yes man, but never had an original thought. $1, I froze. Blackfield just nodded. Keep reading. To my daughter, Piper Holloway Brennan, who chose her husband's family over her own when it mattered. $1. My hands were shaking. The words swam on the page. To my wife, Ruth, who conspired behind my back. I swallowed hard. The house and her retirement fund. Nothing more. And then I saw the next line, and my stomach turned to ice. Because whatever came after that wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be kind. And for the first time in 17 years, I realized my father's story with me wasn't over, not even close. You ever read something that breaks you before it heals you? A few lines of ink that rearrange 20 years of anger, silence, and regret? That was me, sitting in a Manhattan law office holding a letter written by the man who once told me I was dead to him. I thought I was there for paperwork, a formality, a will, an inheritance I didn't want and didn't expect. But what I got was a confession, a redemption, and a final test from a father who'd spent his life mistaking control for love. Harrison Blackfield, the attorney, cleared his throat as I stared down at the last line of my father's will. His voice was calm, almost too calm for what he was about to say. Then came the paragraph that changed everything. He adjusted his glasses, eyes flicking from the document to me. To my son, Bryce Holloway. He paused. Everything else. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What? I asked. Blackfield didn't flinch. Everything else, he repeated. The company valued at $60 million. 12 properties across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. $20 million. The investment portfolio, $17 million. The art collection, the cars, the vacation homes. Total estate value, $97 million. My stomach dropped. The room spun. This can't be right, I said, my voice barely audible. He disowned me. He stood up at my sister's wedding and told everyone I was dead to him. Blackfield didn't argue. Instead, he reached into a folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written across it in sharp, unmistakable handwriting. The same letters that had once signed every school check, every business deal, every ultimatum. He insisted this be given to you personally, Blackfield said quietly. He spent 3 hours in this office writing it while suffering heart failure. Refused to go to the hospital until it was finished. I held that envelope like it might bite. My hands were trembling before I even tore it open. Inside was a single page, handwritten, ink slightly smudged at the edges. The words were jagged, but the meaning, it was clear. Bryce, I've been dying for 6 months, and with death comes a kind of clarity I wish I'd had 20 years ago. My throat tightened. I could hear his voice, low and steady like he was reading it aloud from across the room. You were right. At Piper's wedding, you were right. I built an empire but lost my soul. I turned Colton into a shadow who never learned to think for himself. I watched Piper abandon everything I taught her the moment Nathan's family offered her a better name and a bigger house. And your mother. She knew about veterinary school. She protected you from me. I called it betrayal. It was love. I stopped breathing. You, Bryce, you stood up to me in front of 200 people. You walked away from millions to follow your calling. You lived in your car rather than compromise your values. You ate ramen for years rather than beg for forgiveness. Every private investigator's report I received said the same thing. Yes, I had you watched. Every year, my chest went cold. He had me watched. I know about the German Shepherd you saved during your rotation, the payment plans you offered struggling families, the fund you keep for elderly pet owners. I know you spent your last $20 on antibiotics for a stray cat instead of food for yourself. The ink blurred. My eyes were wet, but I couldn't stop reading. You became the man I pretended to be. While I preached about sacrifice, you actually sacrificed. While I talked about integrity, you lived it. While I built a fortune, you built a life worth living. I swallowed hard, every line cutting and mending at once. The company needs someone with real courage to lead it, someone who can't be bought, someone who won't trade decency for profit. That isn't Colton. That isn't Piper. That's you. I'm sorry I waited until I was dead to say this. I'm sorry I stole 20 years from us. I'm sorry I broke your mother's heart, your sister's day, and your trust. I'm sorry my pride was worth more to me than my son. You asked for nothing. You deserve everything. So everything is what you'll receive. Your father, whether you want me or not. Dennis Holloway. There was a postscript. P.S. There's a German Shepherd puppy at the Columbus shelter. 7 months old, bad hip. They'll put him down Tuesday unless someone adopts him. Consider it my last request. That was the line that broke me. 20 years of anger, resentment, silence, gone in an instant. My vision blurred. My hands shook so hard the letter crumpled. I cried like I hadn't since I was a kid, back when I still believed my father could fix anything. Blackfield didn't say a word. He just pushed a box of tissues across the table and quietly left the room. Later, he told me he'd handled hundreds of emotional will readings, but this was the first time he'd seen a father apologize from beyond the grave. When I finally looked up, an hour had passed. The ink was smudged from tears, the paper soft where I'd held it too tightly. I sat there, surrounded by leather-bound books, staring at the letter that had just rewritten my entire life. When Blackfield returned, he was carrying a stack of forms, transfers, deeds, authorizations. My signature on each one would make me one of the wealthiest men in Ohio. My siblings had already filed an injunction, of course. But the lawyer wasn't worried. Your father was of sound mind, he said. 3 doctors and a psychiatrist verified it. He knew exactly what he was doing. When the last page was signed, Blackfield leaned back. "What will you do now, Mr. Holloway?" I didn't answer right away. My mind drifted. To my clinic in Oregon. To my cracked apartment above the practice. To the smell of coffee and disinfectant. To the stray dogs, the worn-out owners, the quiet satisfaction of saving lives no one else would fight for. Then I thought about $97 million, and what that could mean. Not for me, for them. "For starters," I said, wiping my eyes, "I'm going to Columbus to adopt a German Shepherd. That was 3 weeks ago. The puppy, a scruffy 7-month-old with one floppy ear, is sleeping at my feet as I record this. I named him Dennis. My therapist says that's psychologically significant. I say he just looks like a Dennis. His hip surgery went perfectly. He's already claimed my office chair as his throne, graciously allowing me to borrow it from time to time. As for the company, I'm not selling it, not yet. I'm transforming. IT Holloway Manufacturing is done with automotive parts. We're pivoting, hard. We're going to build affordable surgical tools for small-town vets, prosthetics for injured animals, and diagnostic equipment that doesn't cost more than a family home. The engineers called me crazy. I showed them the market data. Turns out, doing good can also be good business. Colton quit the day after the will reading. Sent me a 2-word text, one I won't repeat here. Piper's lawyers call every few days, but I've stopped answering. Her husband, Nathan, believes they deserve half of everything because family loyalty matters more than legal documents. The irony. Burns, Mom moved in with me for a while. Not to the mansion Dad left me. That's being converted into a veterinary teaching hospital, but to a small house near the new company HQ. She still cries sometimes, but she smiles more now, especially when she walks past Dad's old desk, which is now buried under veterinary journals instead of automotive blueprints. He was so stubborn, she told me last night, over the first home-cooked meal we've shared in 20 years. You both were. She was right. 20 years of silence because neither of us would pick up the phone. 20 years of pride. The most expensive thing we ever bought. She told me how, after a few drinks, he'd ask about me. If I was happy, if I was safe. She'd lie, say she didn't know. Even when Trevor told her about my graduation, my clinic, my successes, she stayed silent. Maybe we were both waiting for the other to blink first. I think about that a lot. How pride can look like strength, but it's really just fear in a sharper suit. I kept one piece of my old life. The clinic in Oregon. I hired 2 young vets, Jessica Martinez and Kevin Chen. Both brilliant. Both drowning in student loans. I paid them off anonymously. They think some mysterious benefactor stepped in. I haven't told them it was me, and I never will. The staff doesn't know their quiet, coffee-fueled boss is now worth $97 million. I intend to keep it that way. Dad was wrong about me at that wedding. I wasn't a disappointment, but I was wrong about him too. He wasn't just a cold businessman. He was also a man haunted by regret, who spent 20 years keeping tabs on a son he couldn't bring himself to call, who used his final hours to make amends in the only language he understood. Legacy. The letter sits framed on my desk now, right beside a photo from Piper's wedding, the last one of us all together. We're smiling, frozen in that hour before everything fell apart. Sometimes I stare at it and wonder what could have been. If we'd been less proud, if I'd picked up the phone, if he'd said, "I'm sorry," just once while he was still alive. But then Dennis nudges my leg, tail thumping softly against the floor, reminding me that forgiveness doesn't always arrive when people are still breathing. Sometimes it comes in the form of a letter that took 20 years to write. Sometimes it looks like a puppy with a bad hip and a second chance. The money will build something good. The company will change. The properties will become shelters and rehab centers. But that's not the real inheritance. The real inheritance is written in my father's shaky handwriting. The lesson he left behind. That love doesn't always sound like approval. That forgiveness can travel through time. That the people who break us can still be the ones who teach us how to heal. Dennis stirs at my feet, one ear twitching, eyes half open as if he's listening to every word. Outside, the sun's setting. The same color as the roses from Piper's wedding. The same light that once fell on the moment my old life ended. And for the first time in 20 years, I think maybe my father's story, our story, isn't finished yet. Shielkurnden.